Shalom, shalom, shalom to everyone watching. This is Rabbi Mashiach with the Ways of Israel, Darchei Israel, with some thoughts for the day, in particular, with everything that's going on in the world, with all of the pushback to our President Donald J. Trump. I want to just throw this out in the fact that whenever I say anything good about Trump, I really get people to make some really disparaging remarks, and it tends to be from the left, both Jew and non-Jew alike. And, people don't realize the good that has entered into the United States, and all they can do is look for ways to discount it, and to say, oh, you're idolatrizing Trump. No, and I'm going to get into that a little bit. Right now, people don't realize that what has taken place in the United States is really a miracle. People on the left did everything they could to stop this president from becoming president. And we're seeing this all coming out, even from the files and in the deep state. Everything is being revealed, thank God. So everything that we stated before is in fact true. There was a plot to try to remove this president, and I'm still convinced that those that were involved in the attempt of his life were from the Democratic Party side. I have no question or doubt inside of me regarding that. And we still see this force arising to try to squash everything that Donald Trump and Americans wanted him to do. He's doing everything, fulfilling every single promise in a record speed level. I haven't seen anything like that. But what has really captured me, and I'm sure many of you who study Torah, who study the Bible, who study the religious scripts, know very clearly that this man is unique in our history, the history of the world in particular. He has been, you might say, given like my good friend Lee Crow from Israel, he has been given a charge. I mean, it's been like a lightning that has emboldened him, especially after the attempt against his life. What would you say about that? Well, I think he has been, literally, I'm going to use this word very liberally, he has been anointed. Anointed. In the Torah, there's only a couple of times when it mentions a person who's not Jewish is anointed. And one of them was Cyrus, who basically was the one that called on the nations of the world to build and reconstruct the temple period. By the way, those of you who don't know that, that's exactly what I asked him in a letter that I sent to Mar-a-Lago a couple of years ago, and I got it posted on my Facebook page, that copy of that letter, because I truly believe that with the influence and with the power of this particular president, if he were to call the nations of the world to rebuild the temple, rebuild the house of the Lord, as it were, because there's a vacuum, a spiritual vacuum throughout the world, and this has been clearly understood. Even Trump has said this many times. We need to get back to God. Of course, that puts many Jews into a state of shaking. Oh, he's going to bring back the fundamentalist right. That's what they're concerned about. I'm not concerned about that at all. Not at all. I mean, after all, when you look at the positions of many of the Christians, they're somewhat in line with many of Orthodox Jewry. So it's a good thing, not a bad thing by me. The big problem that we have, and I'm going to talk about that in my next video, is the irreligious, liberal leftist Jews in Israel as well as here in this country. Many years ago, in the Nixon Library, which I used to live out there in Yorba Linda, those of you who don't know, and I had a chance when I used to attend Rabbi David Eliezer's shul, Chabad of Yorba Linda, beautiful shul by the way, and some beautiful people there. I remember we went to the Nixon Library, and this is when it was exposed that in the Nixon tapes, Billy Graham, who is one of President Trump's favorite preachers, as it were, had expressed in secret meetings with Nixon that these liberal Jewish individuals were the problem of a lot of the things that was happening back in the Nixon years. And listening to the tapes and hearing exactly what Billy Graham was saying, I would have to agree that what he stated to then President Nixon was right. When you have liberal Jews without no Torah, without no God in their lives, they become a menace to society. Just look at Soros, a Lithuanian Jew who's destroying society with his liberal agenda. So look at the liberal leftist judicial system that have taken possession of many key factors of the justice system. And it's that, their values, that is completely so inept, so completely opposite, that has destroyed the very fibers of this country. And dare say I can destroy the very fibers of Israel. Israel has to make a major decision as to where the country is going. So far, I support what Bibi Netanyahu is doing. So you may probably write all types of things saying, oh, he's a blah, 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 blah. No. All of Israel belongs to all of Israel. Anyone who's studied the Bible, anyone who's studied the Torah knows that what Israel has today is not even all of Israel. Judea and Samaria belongs to Israel. There's even further parts up north belongs to Israel. Greater Israel is not yet achieved. The only way this can happen, the only way we can see the expanded Israel take place is if and when the rabbinate in Israel opens the door of so many people throughout the world that have gone through halakhic conversions or conversions done by Orthodox rabbis who perhaps are not on the list, their list of accepted rabbinical courts. That's the only way we can see a flood of new Jews arriving at new locations to live the Jewish life in the Jewish land. I'm just telling you how it is. And I thank God for President Trump, that he's raised the voice for spirituality and the call in this country to get back to God. The only way you can make America great is if people get back to God, get back to biblical values, the idea of one God. It's the only way. When people begin to call upon the name of the Lord responds gratefully upon those who call upon him, without exception, whether you're Jewish or not. In this, I agree with him, it needs to be voiced on every street corner and every nick and cranny of this nation. This nation was created because and based upon the idea of God, and has moved away from that idea and from that concept and moved into a society where God has no place in its school, in its culture, and it's everywhere. So you make the idea of God coming back into the lives of people, and that is what will make America great again. And in addition to what President Trump is doing, we need to bring back this country to God. There needs to be a call to come back to God. I remember many years ago how the Christians used to have big crusades, come back to God, one day for God. Actually, it shouldn't be one day. It should be 365 days of the whole entire year for God. We are nothing without God. And even religious leaders had called to bring prayer back to school. We Jews, Orthodox Jews, have no problem with that concept. It is only the secular and those who are weak knees that are afraid of that. They're afraid of bringing back a school because they're going to put a man God in his place. No man God can ever replace the real God. Keep that in mind. And if you're worried about that, you should be worried about some religious groups within our own culture that pushes on a man that has passed away, and they call, and I won't even mention it, but they believe that he is God in the flesh. He is the Ein Sof in the human body. Very similar to another religion that we know of and that we're all scared about, don't we? No, my friends, I certainly believe that President Trump has that oomph, has that anointment from above to do what he's doing. In addition to that, let me say this. We read by the Rambam, our hope and prayer is for the coming or manifestation of the Mashiach, right? Yet, it says, even by the Rambam, that the Mashiach would be a greater king than all of the leaders of the nations, which would probably include Trump. So that means if someone comes around saying he's Mashiach, and he's not at least at the level, political level, of a President Trump, I'm sorry, not the one. Now, I will get into what the Rambam says what's required from the King Mashiach. That's going to be on another video in English, because I've done so many of these videos in Spanish, and anyone who speaks Spanish can look at my videos regarding the Mashiach and why the previous ones in our history just doesn't have it. As a matter of fact, someone got upset because I put out a letter for those who are doing conversions with us that negates belief in JC and in Mamish. They got all upset. Why do you do that? Well, not only Mamish, but also in Muhammad. Clearly, we negate the idea that these individuals are divine or God. Anyone believing that they're divine or they're basically God in the flesh are basically putting someone else in place of God in their lives. That's what I hold, that's what I believe, and that's why we created a letter called a letter of negation, because to become part of Kalal Israel, you have to negate all forms of idolatry. And unfortunately, these that I mentioned has become that form of modern day idolatry for even the Jewish people. You don't believe me? Go to any shops, any shops that basically are kosher and basically celebrates the Jewish leadership. You'll see pictures, icons. I could take you to one close in Hollywood, and basically you see the picture everywhere, the decals everywhere. It's like visiting the Vatican, as it were. Well, I know I've been castigated for those words of mine by my fellow Jews, but I have to say what I feel is true. And number one, I don't elevate Trump to the level of an idol, just the opposite. I see certain qualities that has brought him up to the point of being considered, like Cyrus, our modern day anointed non-Jewish leader, changing and doing crazy things that many of the liberal Jews would not even dare do, just the opposite. They're fighting against him. Can you imagine fighting against biblically divine concepts? I'm in shock. And I know many of the Jewish communities in shock by the reactions of the liberal left. And that's why I'm glad that a lot of these people need to be kicked out of their political positions in Congress. They definitely do not represent my voice and my views. Unfortunately. I wish they were more religious, more committed to the idea of spreading the idea of God throughout their own areas. Obviously, they're only concerned about themselves. Yes, we need to bring back Jews, but we also need to be the light among the Jews, not as a dark side like there are currently. May God help us. May God give us strength. May God bless all of Israel to be that light that the Torah talks about, and to shine our light no matter where we are at, where we're in. Like we see a lot of these hostages coming out from Israel. Grateful that God has spared them. And we continue to spare and pray for the release of the remaining hostages in Israel. May God grant our prayers, our tefillah, and make it great again, Israel. May we see the emergence of the Davidic dynasty. Now I'm going to give you share another idea, because I've been exposed to a lot of things dealing with my own desire to see the arrival and the uprising of the true Mashiach in our midst. I'm going to talk to you about one of them, because a lot of people think, well, this rabbi happened to be a descendant of David. You're in for a shock. It's not the case. As a matter of fact, a good friend of mine, I'll add this here before I close this segment here. A good friend of mine who owns a DNA company, and I'm not going to say his name because they're going to bombard him, and he said this confidentially to me, not to even mention his name because they would shoot him down. That's how powerfully I call it, this religious group is in this United States. He said to me, look, we did DNA tests, and we compared them one to another. We compared them to this group and that group, haplop, there's a whole entire haplop group of descendants of David from the male line that they've been looking into to see who really is descendants of David. And he said this person who is the leader of this major Hasidic group, what is told by the history books or the history of that organization and what lines up by the DNA discoveries, that person is not a descendant of David. Who said? I'm not going to go into that. I just said to me, and we talked about this confidentially, but you can lay assured he wasn't a descendant of Mashiach, which is one of the requirements for Mashiach. He has to be of the line of David. He wasn't. Now you may restructure and recreate history and recount history to your liking, but in fact, as they say, the facts are the facts. And he's not from the line of David. Even JC can be argued he is neither the line of David if he was born from the Holy Spirit, which that I could get into. He wasn't born like people think of an immaculate conception. That's a doctrine. That's not factual. And I suggested to this person who owns the DNA organization, why can't they get a couple of DNA samples from the tomb of David? And said to me, the big problem there is that we don't know if really King David is buried where he says, where Israel says he's buried, and whether that cadaver belongs to King David or not. How about Shlomo HaMelech? How about one of the other descendants that were known? There's a Jewish law that prohibits interrupting the body, the sacred burial of a descendant of David or of royalty, as it were. But that would be an easy way to find out who today is a true descendant, patrilineally and matrilineally, from the house of David. Now, why am I mentioning Trump? Because as you've seen how Trump basically jumped on the stage and basically became the very chosenness of the man for the hour in a way that no one could stop him. And is a very wealthy man. Same thing is the same requirements as we will see by the Rambam, by the Mashiach. So it's got to be a very wealthy man. It's got to be a person that is known to be of the house of David paternally, and that's involved in bringing Jews back, and involved in pushing the idea of rebuilding the temple, and brings back Jews to Eretz Israel, which, by the way, that was not done by the other previous ones, contenders to the throne. So those certain elements are very basic, very basic. As I say many times, that previous person was not the Moshe Rabbeinu of our generation. As a matter of fact, Rabbi Ovadia Yosef would have qualified much more so than any of the previous one. Keep this in mind. Don't be offended, my dear friends. Facts are facts, and hopefully you wake up to those facts. And we'll look at a little bit more by the Rambam what that means. This is Rabbi Moshe Otero. Trump, to me, is like the Cyrus. He's like the anointed of the non-Jewish world and bringing about change. And hope and pray soon. And a couple of people that I've spoken to said that will happen. He, and his appropriate moment, will declare the nations to call to bring back the house of the Lord, to help rebuild the house of the Lord. Keep in mind what he did with Gaza. He appropriated Gaza in the benefit of us Jews. Plus, Jared is Jewish. And that's the family connection there. He's not taking over of Gaza for himself, but rather to establish what he wants to establish for Israel for its own benefit. Wake up, people. There are things behind the scenes you have no idea that's happening. And may God bless President Trump. May he bless his children, Donald Jr., all of the children, Eric. May God bless also this young, bright man that I've seen, and I've looked at his website or his Facebook, and I'll be honest with you, I'm so impressed by Barron. Wow, this kid has seichel, he has humility, he has a lot of things that I'm saying. Keep an eye on him. He can be the next president of the United States. This young man, though he's quiet, he says things just by his. I mean, I'm impressed by him, no doubt about it. President Trump and Melania has raised him very well. Very smart kid, very talented young man. And I pray that God continues to bless him with wisdom and with strength and with ruchnius from above. This is a special kid, no doubt about it. So keep your eyes on him, because you're going to hear in the future a lot about Barron, hopefully only for good. This is Rabbi Moshe Otero, wishing you a wonderful week. Shalom.